Hi, welcome to A British Audiophile. If you don't know me already, my name is Taryn. Now the Triangle Borea range of speakers, that's a well-liked, well-reviewed range of speakers. And I think the baby in the range is the BR02 that retails for £319 here in the UK. That's one possible solution offered by Triangle. You just add the amplifier and your source component of choice. An alternative is to consider their powered solution, and that's what I have here today, the Elara LN01A. Wow, that's some name. In any case, it retails for £599, some £280 more than the BR02. And for your extra £280, you get built-in amplification, a DAC, phono stage for turntable users, and Bluetooth connectivity to connect to your phone or mobile device. Let's see what it's about. So let's get some housekeeping out of the way. This speaker retails for £599 here in the UK. As far as I can tell, it retails for $859 in the US. Now Adorama, who I've previously mentioned on this channel, have kindly agreed to provide me with affiliate links for any items that they happen to stock that I review. And that's the case here. They provided me with an affiliate link. It's in the description notes. So if you're interested in purchasing this speaker and you use that link, it does help out the channel, and that's very much appreciated. The other thing that Adorama have kindly supplied is a discount code which is operational at the time of filming this video, which is March 2021. If you put in the code LN Reviews, that's Lima November Reviews, into the discount code on Adorama's website, you get a $200 discount on the purchase price of this speaker, dropping it from $859 to $659. So again, Adorama, much appreciated. The Triangle Elara LN01A is a compact two-way monitor speaker measuring 29 centimeters high, 16.5 centimeters wide, and 22.5 centimeters deep. It weighs a fairly substantial 5.2 kilograms. It connects via a conventional speaker cable to a slave or passive speaker, which weighs naturally a little less at 4.6 kilograms. For those in America, those numbers are 11.5 times 6.5 times 9 inches, 11.5 pounds for the right master speaker, and 10.2 pounds for the left slave. Reassuringly, this is an impressively built and well finished speaker given the price. The cabinet is constructed from 18mm MDF all round, except for the front baffle, which is a little thicker at 21mm. The LN01A is available in satin white, eggplant, satin black and abyss blue. The drivers are a 25mm 1-inch silk dome tweeter and 135mm 5¼ inch treated paper mid-woofer, crossing over at 2 kHz. The plate amplifier on the back of the master speaker houses two 50-watt Class D amplifier modules. There's also an internal DAC based on the Cirrus Logic WM8761 chip. You can connect digitally via coax or optical. There's a conventional analog RCA input, a 3.5mm auxiliary input, and an output to connect to a subwoofer. You can switch the RCA input to phono to connect to a turntable with a moving magnet cartridge, because the LN01A also has a built-in phono stage. Finally, there's a Bluetooth connection that's based on the older aptX 4.0 codec to allow you to pair to your phone or mobile device. There's a manual adjustment for the volume, but I think it's remiss not to include some manual input selection as well. Instead, you have to rely on the supplied remote control, which may be an issue if you lose or break it. The remote allows you to adjust the bass and treble by ±6 dB. Each time you press the button, the output is adjusted by 2 dB, and the LED on the front of the speaker flashes to confirm that the system has responded. I do have a bit of an issue with Triangle marketing the LN01A as an active speaker. It's a powered speaker and there is an important difference. Let me just explain. In a conventional hi-fi system, you have your source component feeding your signal to your amplifier, which in turn feeds the signal to your speakers. Inside the speakers themselves is a crossover network, and its job is to filter the high frequencies to the tweeter and the mid and low frequencies to the mid-woofer in a two-way design, and that's what we're talking about here. It's called a passive crossover because it's made up of passive components, resistors, capacitors and inductors. They don't actually require any power to operate. They simply passively allow the signal to pass through them, altering the signal, doing their job. Active systems are different. The filtration actually happens before the amplification stage, and it's done by active electronic components that do require their own power to operate. Examples of electronic components would be diodes, transistors, and op-amps. There are certain sonic benefits to this approach, one being that the signal is actually broken up when it's still a relatively small voltage. And because the filtration happens before the amplification stage, you now require a separate amplifier for each driver. But that amplifier is directly coupled to that driver, again providing sonic benefits. Now it's clear why Triangle couldn't go down that route here with a £600 speaker system, but I do think it's misleading to market this speaker as an active system when it is effectively a passive powered system, and I would ask Triangle to take a look at this. The first thing that struck me when listening to the LN01As was how clean it sounded. Now this is primarily down to a very fast and agile bass, and this is a characteristic of good Class D amplifiers. I think that's what you have here. It isn't the last word in terms of bass extension. It's 3 dB down at 56 Hz, and there's no fancy DSP trickery going on to extend the bass response, as is the case in some other powered speakers. In terms of bass weight and dynamics, it's good, but nothing remarkable. There's certainly bigger and more dynamic systems out there, even at this price point, but the bass that is delivered is fast, it's agile, with a reasonable sense of weight. Many inexpensive Class D amplifiers have a thin sounding mid-range, but there's no such issue here. That lack of bloom in the bass translates to a clean sounding mid-range. The leading edges of notes are fairly easy to track, and there's more than a hint to the decay structure of notes as well. But perhaps the most surprising characteristic of the LN01As is how full the mid-range sounds, and that gives this speaker a very natural presentation. Even tricky to reproduce instruments, things like trumpets, saxophones and pianos, are reproduced faithfully. Clean, yes, but not necessarily detailed. Let me explain. The information that's pulled off the recording is presented cleanly. You don't get the sense that anything is being smeared, but there's a limitation to the amount of information that's being pulled off the recording. There's certainly systems out there that will give you more detail. You get the meat and bones of the presentation with the LN01As, but not much else. Now, what doesn't really help in that regard is that the highs are a little rolled off. Now, sure, you can adjust the treble response with the tone controls, but you've got to bear in mind the crossover point on these speakers is at 2000 Hz. So when you're adjusting the highs, you're also adjusting the upper mid-range as well. I clicked the treble setting up one click from the central position, and that helped a bit, but any more than that, I felt that the upper mid-range started to sound aggressive. In terms of comparisons, I apologise, I couldn't get a direct competitor here to go against the LN01As at £600. The closest I could get was the Iota VX SA3 amplifier that retails for £400, and my PSB Imagine Mini speakers that used to retail for £600. So that's a £1,000 system up against a £600 system. It should sound better, and it did technically across the board. The soundstage was wider, it was deeper, there was a lot more information that was pulled off the recording, and surprisingly perhaps, despite the PSBs being a much smaller speaker, they were equally as dynamic, partly because they're quite a punchy little speaker, but also because the Iota VX is quite a gutsy little amplifier. Now, as good as those two individual components are, and they are really good within their market segments, I wouldn't naturally put them together. The PSB Imagine Minis are just too revealing of the shortcomings of the Iota VX SA3 in terms of refinement in the mid-range. What that meant is that after about an hour of listening to that combination, I started to suffer from listening fatigue. That wasn't an issue with the LN01As. It has a warm, slightly laid-back presentation that you can listen to for hours on end, if not days on end, without contributing to any listening fatigue at all. I'm pretty certain I'll get asked for a comparison between the LN01As and my 2020 product of the year, the Acoustic Energy AE1s, so I may as well comment here. The Acoustic Energy AE1s have built-in amplification and retail for £1,000. They don't have the built-in DAC, phono stage or Bluetooth connectivity, but they are a proper active system. Now, I didn't have that here to do a direct A-B comparison, but it's fair to say that the AE1s would see off my IOTA and PSB combination. In fact, they're that good, I'd probably put them up against the PSB Imagine Minis with the best part of £1,000 worth of amplification. So it's pretty clear that the LN01As aren't quite operating at the same level. In terms of partner equipment, the difficult job here has been done for you with built-in amplification. In fact, it has a built-in DAC, phono stage and Bluetooth connectivity. So just add whatever source component you wish, whether it's a CD player, a streamer, a turntable or your phone or mobile device that you connect via Bluetooth. I didn't detect much difference between the various types of connections. Even the Bluetooth wasn't that far behind the coaxial and optical digital inputs. I didn't try the phono stage because I don't have a turntable, but what I did try was my external Chord Mojo DAC connected to the RCA input, and that improved the sound a little bit, but not enough to warrant buying an external DAC. This is a small room speaker. Triangle's recommendation is to stick to rooms with a footprint of 20 square meters or less. Now, my idea of a small room is typically a room with a footprint of 15 square meters or less. Say for example a 3 meter by 5 meter room. The sweet range in this speaker is from 1.5 meters to 2.5 meters. That's the distance from you to the speaker, and you want a similar distance between the two speakers themselves to try and create an equilateral triangle. If you get a little bit further away than that, the clarity and cohesion drops off quite a bit. But I do think you can get away with being a bit closer. So those of you who are listening in the near field or want to use this speaker at the end of a desk in a desktop type scenario, I think you're going to be absolutely fine as long as you're at least about a meter away from the speakers. They play very well at low volumes and they have plenty of grip and punch in the bottom end that helps. In terms of toe-in, I had these speakers slightly wider apart so that I could toe them in a little bit more aggressively and have the tweeters pointing directly on axis towards my ears. Now I did that because, as I mentioned in this review, the highs are a little bit rolled off, so having them directly pointing to my ears maximised the treble response while still maintaining a reasonably wide sound stage. Now I've mentioned a number of times that all speakers, unless they're specifically designed to do so, benefit from being away from walls. But the benefit with these speakers are that you can tune the bass if you are placing them closer to the wall. Just drop the bass down 1 or 2 notches and it actually does compensate quite nicely for any boominess that you would ordinarily get. So it's time to wrap things up. Who is the Triangle Elara LN01A for and who isn't it for? Well, it isn't for people who want the last word in scale and dynamics. Even at this price, I suspect there's bigger sounding systems out there. And it isn't for people who are chasing every little last detail and want sparkly highs. It is for people who want a convenient solution for a small room. Either they want something at the end of their desk, perhaps they're even connecting it to a TV and they can accommodate 2 small speakers instead of a soundbar. Quite frankly, it'll blow most soundbars out of the water. It has a natural, slightly laid-back presentation and a clean, controlled sound, and it's quite worthy of its recommended tag from this channel. It's time for this week's featured track, and I'm in a blues mood today, so I've chosen a track by the late, great John Lee Hooker. He's one of the first names that springs to mind when I think of great blues singers that have that gravitas, that chestiness in the voice that I love so much. And the track that I've chosen is Kick Hit for Hit Kicks You. It's a ridiculous name, I know. I'll put a link in the description notes. It's a tribute actually to Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix that lost their life to drugs way too early. And what I love about this is his vocal performance, which is fantastic as always, but the tightness of the band. You'd be forgiven for closing your eyes and thinking that you're in Greenwich Village somewhere or in New Orleans. I hope you enjoy it. Well, that's it from me for today. All that remains for me to say is if you like this video, please hit that like button, please share it. And if you like what I'm doing with this channel and you haven't subscribed already, please think about subscribing. And oh yes, don't forget to hit that bell notification button so that you know when new videos arrive. But for today, for now, a British audiophile signing off.